Severus Snape chose poverty over the Prince family? It sounds insane, doesn't it? We all know Snape grew up in Spinner's End, a grimy, poor Muggle neighborhood. But we also know his mother, Eileen Prince, came from a powerful, incredibly wealthy pureblood dynasty. The Prince family had gold, houses, prestige. The question isn't if the Prince fortune existed. It's why Snape, the half-blood prince, never claimed it. The answer isn't simple stubborn pride. It's a deep, dark, psychological wound that explains almost everything about his life. The secret lies not in what the prince's inheritance offered him, but what it symbolized. It symbolized the very conflict that destroyed his mother, and, by extension, him. We are diving deep into the real reason Snape preferred the shadows of poverty over the golden cage of the prince legacy.
The paradox of the prince name. We have two incredibly conflicting images of Severus Snape. Snape, the perpetually resentful, underpaid potion master living in the shadow of neglect and misery, and the Prince family, one of the sacred 28 pure-blood families whose wealth and prestige rivaled the Malfoys. Eileen Prince was indeed disowned for marrying a Muggle, Tobias Snape. But in the wizarding world, when an heir is disowned, the line of succession often shifts. It doesn't always vanish. Snape was Eileen's only son, her bloodline, her magical continuation. The gold, the ancestral houses, the vast magical library, the heirlooms passed down through generations. It was all there, or at least a significant portion of it. It was waiting for a prince to claim it, and Severus had the blood right. Why live in misery when he had a ticket out? Why endure the poverty that fostered his resentment and his sense of superiority over Muggles when his mother's magical name could have elevated him out of the gutter instantly? We focus too much on him embracing the name Half-Blood Prince as a rebellious act, but we need to focus on the prince part. The name was about identity, but the inheritance was about the cost of that identity. The wealth was there, but it came with a stigma. It came with a price.
Eileen's shadow and the pure blood stigma.
Let's look at the actual price tag of that inheritance. The Prince family were textbook pureblood supremacists. They were an exclusive, elitist family who believed their bloodline was inherently superior. To reclaim his title and wealth, Snape would have to formally denounce his Muggle heritage, and more importantly, denounce his mother's most defiant act, marrying a Muggle. To claim the gold, Snape would be forced to publicly embrace the very ideology that pushed his mother, Eileen Prince, away. Eileen chose Tobias, a Muggle, over her family's toxic, suffocating, and ultimately destructive ideology. By claiming the wealth, Snape would be tacitly endorsing the prince's cruel rejection of his mother. This is the psychological core. Snape may have hated his father, Tobias, who was abusive and hateful, making it easy to denounce the man, but denouncing the Muggle identity itself would have meant completely rejecting his mother's choice, her one true act of defiance against her own repressive upbringing. Snape didn't want the family. He only wanted the name. The title Half-Blood Prince was a way to reclaim his mother's magical, true identity without accepting the poisonous baggage of pureblood elitism. His rejection of the gold was his ultimate act of loyalty to his mother's memory and her rebellion.
The defiance of poverty. Snape's life was defined by the relentless struggle to gain control. He was powerless against his father, Tobias. He was powerless against the Marauders. He was powerless in love with Lily. His commitment to his meager, poverty-stricken life in Spinner's End became a strange form of self-control. It was a shield. If Snape had accepted the prince's wealth, he would have instantly become a high-profile, influential figure in the pureblood community. Such status would have come with endless social obligations, expectations, and vulnerabilities. He would have been beholden to the whims of the elitist pureblood circle. He would have risked becoming exactly what he hated the most, a powerless puppet controlled by the expectations of the pureblood elite. This vulnerability was his biggest fear. Snape was a Slytherin who valued ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness. To him, wealth earned through merit, like his skills as a potion master or his secret role as a double agent, was infinitely superior to wealth given by birthright. Claiming the Prince Gold would have been the easy, weak way out. Snape consistently chose the hard path, the path of sacrifice and earned respect, because it gave him autonomy, control, and leverage.
The Voldemort connection, the strategic reason. Let's discuss a terrifying practical reason: Lord Voldemort. If Snape had formally claimed the prince's fortune, he would have instantly become a high-profile, influential figure within the Death Eater movement. He would be expected to fund their operations, host their meetings, and display the ostentatious wealth that Voldemort and his inner circle adored. Such status would have placed him directly under Voldemort's demanding and often paranoid scrutiny. Snape was indeed committed to the dark arts initially, but we know his motivations shifted toward protecting Lily Evans. Even after her death, his primary goal was his secret mission with Dumbledore. By staying poor and operating in the shadows of Spinner's End, he was less noticeable, more disposable, and therefore, paradoxically, safer for his secret missions. A filthy, low-key, half-blood Death Eater who lives in the Muggle world is far less likely to be suspected as a double agent than a high-society pureblood who owns a manor. Think of the prince's fortune as a debt to pureblood supremacy, a debt to the legacy that ruined his mother. Snape refused to pay that price. He preferred the moral clarity of his low-status, self-made life, even if that life was miserable. His life was lean and powerful. It had no room for the filler material of inherited luxury, which would only complicate his most important mission.
The Prince family, the sins of the fathers. Extended analysis. To truly understand Snape's rejection, we must look at the Prince family history. The princes were tied by marriage and blood to some of the most zealous pureblood families, including the Selwyns and the Blacks. Their wealth was not just material, it was a symbol of centuries of unquestioned elitism and likely involvement in the worst excesses of wizarding history. Eileen Prince's act of marrying Tobias was a spectacular failure of their bloodline control. For Snape to claim the inheritance, he would be forced to reconcile with that history. He would have to walk into that mansion, see the portraits of his ancestors, and implicitly say, "I forgive your bigotry. I accept your gold." Snape, a man consumed by his own guilt and self-hatred, was already carrying the burden of his failure to protect Lily. Adding the moral stain of the prince's legacy, a legacy of hate and exclusion, would have been unbearable. The gold wasn't just gold, it was blood money. And Snape, having witnessed what pureblood fanaticism did to his own mother, and what it cost him with Lily, decided he could not accept the cursed prize. He couldn't be the beneficiary of the very system he was, in his own twisted way, fighting against. He might be an elitist Slytherin, but even he had a line, and that line was drawn around the memory of Eileen and Lily. The parallel to Dumbledore. This brings us to the final, fascinating psychological layer. Snape's rejection mirrors the fundamental failure of Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore, too, came from a deeply dysfunctional family and was tempted by the intoxicating power of Gellert Grindelwald's ideology. An ideology that, much like the Prince Fortune, offered him a way out of his personal misery and into a position of supreme, unquestioned authority. Dumbledore spent his life refusing to take high office, refusing power, and choosing a simple headmastership. Why? Because he knew the moment he accepted absolute power, the gold, the darkness within him, the bigotry, would resurface. He was haunted by his past mistake. Snape understood this intuitively. He saw the gold as a trap. If he accepted the inherited wealth and status, he risked becoming exactly what he feared, a man corrupted by power and the legacy of hate. His choice to remain poor was his version of Dumbledore's choice to remain only the headmaster, a self-imposed penance to control the darker impulses that the prince's blood might represent. Both men chose sacrifice over comfort to contain their complex and potentially destructive pasts.
The final act of love, the real reason. Let's bring it all back to the core emotional truth. Snape's love was an endless loop of pain stemming from his divided identity, half Muggle, half pureblood. His rejection of the gold was his ultimate act of love for Eileen. By refusing the prince's inheritance, he validated his mother's original defiant choice to leave that world for love. He gave her, in death, the silent respect she never received in life. He chose the human side, represented by his Muggle birthplace, over the magical elitism side, represented by the Prince Gold. His entire existence was a penance. His poverty was his shield, his penance, and his most profound declaration of defiance against the pure-blood system that took everything from him. He couldn't buy his way out of his suffering because the only currency he valued was sacrifice.
So, Severus Snape didn't ignore the Prince Fortune because of simple pride. He did it because he couldn't reconcile the toxicity of the Prince legacy with the love for his mother and the memory of Lily. His decision to remain poor was the most strategic, the most emotional, and perhaps the most noble thing he ever did. What do you think? Was Snape right to choose the shadows over the gold? Let me know your most controversial opinion in the comments below. And speaking of tragic heroes, my next video reveals the one thing Harry Potter got completely wrong about Dumbledore. If you want more deep dives into the moral complexity of the wizarding world, hit that subscribe button now and click the video on your screen.